Golf enthusiasts, we are back for another week of making some money. I am here with my trusted co-host, Sia Najad, and we have a guest friend, Spencer Aguilar, joining us today. Sia, Spencer, how you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. This is the second time I'm doing your guys' show, and I want to say the first time that I did it, Joel, I think you won $50,000 that week also, so I know you had a good week last week, so maybe I'm the good luck coming on the week after it.
If that's the case, you're on every week.
See, and this is why Spencer's such a professional. If that isn't like a professional segue, I genuinely don't know what is, because Joel, I'm doing well as well, but not as well as you, because remind us, so not only did you win 50,000, almost 250,000 last week, but you've got the semifinals of something pretty big coming up this week, right?
Yes. So for our loyal fans who listen every week, you heard last week me kind of tee up. I made the Fantasy Golf World Championship. It's a 3-round tournament. So the first tier was you have to get in the top 100 out of 250 people, which I successfully did. So now there's 100 of us left. This week, I need to get in the top 40 of the 100. If I'm able to do that, then it advances to the live final, which will be next week. So we've gotten one step down. There's still a lot of work to do, but we've gotten one step down thus far.
So you are one of the 100 this week battling for the top 40. And what's the ultimate prize? What is it again, Joel?
So at next week, the number one prize is $1 million. The good news is that unlike what happened a couple weeks ago, second place is $500,000 and third place is I think like 300. So even if I don't win, I think there's a better chance I make I still made a good amount, but I still make a good chunk if I can get there.
Well, yeah, for those of you that don't remember, Joel had $1 million really in his hands, or so he thought, 3 weeks ago. And then a Colin Morikawa all rounds under 70 bonus launched the second place guy ahead of Joel. So he dropped $900,000 to second place. So lo and behold, he didn't think he'd have another chance at chasing $1 million until the next major, which is quite some time from now. But here we are. He's got a shot at doing it again. That's pretty great. I do, Joel, I want to talk, first of all, Spencer, do you mind just reminding everybody about the Better Golf Pod before? Because I did want to talk to Joel about his lineup that he made to win the 50K last week as well.
Yeah, so I host the Better Golf Pod with Stick Picks over at Win Daily. It's a show that we cover the betting board from top to bottom. We not only look at outrights, we're looking at the top 40 markets, the head-to-head markets, things that we think have a little bit more tangible long-term success with it. Nick, as everybody knows that tunes into this show, is one of the best in this industry. So he has his model. I have my model. We kind of go back and forth trying to figure out what we like. We just recorded for the Wyndham Championship about 30 minutes ago. We got wrapped up filming that. That'll be out tonight. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. You can follow me on Tee Off Sports, and you can follow us at the Better Golf Pod on Twitter to get those episodes every single week.
Yeah, and it's such a good show. And honestly, we do mostly a DFS show for the PGA live stream, but we do talk about outrights and first round leaders and some of the betting stuff towards the end of the show. But we'd love to steal at least some of your insight and some of your picks that you have on the Better Golf Pod, but not all of it, because Better Golf Pod needs to be in the rotation with, of course, the Win Daily PGA live stream. But Joel, I got to ask you, you won 50K, you almost won 250K. I think you thought you might have had that down the stretch as well. We all thought you did. I know a lot of people in our Win Daily Discord chat, which, by the way, if you're not already there, you need to get there. It's really easy. You go to windailysports.com, you sign up. We have like a number of really kind of like special offers, 2-month offers, 6-month offers for prices you're not going to see anywhere else, quite frankly. So enjoy that, get to that real quick, and get in our Discord, enjoy our articles and our projections and all of that stuff. But I know the guys in Discord and girls, because we've got a lot of girls that are emerging in our Discord chat too, which I think is fantastic. Joel, they were wondering what your lineup was, the one that won the 50K.
So the lineup last week that won, if you recall, it had Hideki Matsuyama at the top. I mentioned him first because I was big on him for GPP. I just thought his ownership looked so low. And for like these GPP tournaments, especially like a no-cut smaller field, to get someone that good at that low of ownership was just too good of a value. So I was pretty overweight on Hideki. And honestly, it didn't look like a good pick until Sunday. I mean, Sunday changed everything, where he went completely off. And I was actually on a flight, so I wasn't like watching it live. So I took off and I was like, I'm doing okay. I'll probably make some money, but I'm not going to win too big. And by the time I landed, I was like, holy moly, I'm making money this week. So that was all because Hideki was absolutely on fire. And then the rest of the lineup went Berger, Answer, Smith, English, and Garcia. And the big caveat was, had Smith won the tournament, when obviously he was tied for the lead going into 18, I would have won the 250K. And so he put his 18th tee shot in the woods, and I was like, no. But the saddest part was, had he not tried to be a hero and go for it and just chipped out, and he could have still gotten the par and got into the playoff, I still would have had a shot. But that beautiful mullet blew it for me. But I'll take my consolation prize and go after the Fantasy Golf World Championship this week.
Spencer, I want to ask you, I don't know if you were watching or not when Cam Smith went hero ball, but do you think he knew exactly where he stood in that moment? Or in other words, is it possible that he did that thinking, I probably need to chip this in between the trees and figure something out, as opposed to just getting it back in the fairway?
I would assume he knew, and I think he just took the aggressive route with it, trying to be a hero, and unfortunately it didn't work out. And I was talking to Stick Picks about it on our show, and I know he was in the running to win something also before Cameron Smith did that. So I think that unfortunately cost a lot of the Win Daily team money last week.
So, Spencer, let's stay with you real quick as we kind of like head towards the Wyndham Championship. And Joel, I know last week when you were doing, it was I guess, what was it, 250 in that World Golf Championship last week, was it? So it's down to 100. I know last week you were really kind of trying to build more balanced for that specific tournament. I'd like to know what your approach is for that specific tournament and just in general this week. But first, since we have Spencer on the show, Spencer, one thing I think people really enjoy about the Better Golf Pod is your breakdown of just the strokes gained metrics and your weighted models and things of that nature in terms of the percentages and what you are really honing in on. So do you mind sort of going over that with us? And then maybe we can just get into the DFS preview.
Yeah, of course. I mean, before we look at anything from a statistical perspective, like this is a less than driver setup that rewards fairways gained. Players hit a tour high 73.8% of greens here historically, but I don't think every green measures equally. On all Donald Ross designs, you have undulation, you have tiered setups. If you miss to the wrong part of the green, 3 putts come into play. So I started with a 17.5% weighted proximity from 125 to 175 yards. 64% of irons come from this range, and I think it'll yield most of the scoring opportunities that we have. I placed 15% on par 4 average between 400 to 450 yards. That's not a stat that I love usually weighing. I don't love those outlier things that aren't as quantifiable long-term with it, but we do have 8 holes that fall within that. I think it pairs really nicely between the 125 to 175. I think it's why we see so many approach shots come from that distance there. Little hesitant on doing it. Do have 15%, like the pairing of it, but I mean, that would be the one thing of my model that I've gone back and forth on. I have 17.5% on total driving. That's a weighted recalculation I used of 80% accuracy and 20% distance. You need to find fairways here. That's the first step of the equation. Data points to off the tee being 3.8% more impactful than an average tour stop. And I think it's because locating fairways will give players a real chance to control their irons coming in. This is a birdie fest, 12.5% on overall birdie or better, 15% on strokes gained total at easy courses. I have 12.5% on a combined category of strokes gained total on fast Bermuda greens and 3-putt avoidance. The reason why I do that, I don't love weighing putting. I'd rather come about it in an artificial way. To me, the strokes gained total on fast Bermuda at least gives me some putting in it, guys that are going to be able to handle a fast surface. And then the 3-putt avoidance is more of the putting being thrown into that mix. That's a 50-50 split there. And then I wrapped it up with 5% on weighted par 5 and 5% on strokes gained total on Donald Ross designs. Donald Ross course, a lot of the same quirks that we have there. And then we only have 2 par 5s, but they're super eagleable. You can make birdies on them. I just wanted to throw a little bit of weight on those 2 things to try to measure it. But at the end of the day, I'm looking for guys that are good total drivers, guys that are good from that 125 to 175 yard range, and just guys that are going to be smart, that are going to miss to the correct side and be able to avoid 3-putting.
I love it. And by the way, for those of you that were taking copious notes and just sort of, you got a hand cramp and you couldn't take everything down, I've got good news. you can go on YouTube and just go back and just watch us all, or you can go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but Apple Podcasts, and listen to the podcast that will launch about an hour after this show and listen to what Spencer just did. You can also go to Better Golf Pod, where I'm sure he gave a similar, if not the exact same breakdown. So while you're there, make sure you give Win Daily Sports podcast and the Better Golf Podcast a 5-star review. Write a few words if you want, but we do like to get that Apple algorithm going, and hitting 5 stars on Better Golf Pod and on Win Daily Sports is certainly helpful to everybody. And by the way, hitting the like button on YouTube right now is also very helpful. Joel, anything to add there? Obviously, that was pretty comprehensive, and I totally agree. You do want to keep it in the fairway here. Those proximities, 125 to 175, are definitely going to be ones to key in on more than the other proximities. And I do agree that putting is going to be important here, whether it's putting as an isolated stat or 3-putt avoidance to add to that. I think these are going to be kind of faster greens and like Spencer said, undulating. And that's why I'm trying to rule out bad putters. There's a lot of guys that I think are great ball strikers that I'm just not going to be super into this week because I'm worried about the putting. But anything else to add before we launch into this upper tier?
The one thing I'll add on to that is it does seem that there's a certain set of guys that tend to just play better here than they do other places. So course history is something I'm waiting a little bit more than normal, as there's a group of around 10 or so golfers that just have a really strong history here. And those are guys I'm looking to get into my lineups this week.
Yeah, there's a guy, I don't know, the name's escaping me. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. Webb Simpson.
Is it Wyndham's dad?
It's Wyndham's dad. Yes. Narrative gained naming your child. Webb Simpson rates out number 1 in that metric. And so, I mean, just to give you just some that I wrote down, Siwoo obviously has a nice course history here. Webb, Sungjae, Ryan Armour, Peter Malnati has a pretty decent, for his price, pretty decent. Patrick Reed has a decent course history. Of course, he's not in the tournament anymore. Kokrak, Bryce Garnett has been pretty good. Harmon's been decent. There's a few more, but those are just the ones I jotted down before the show. So let's just get into it, right, Joel? Do you want to let's talk about this 10K and above range? And Spencer, I know you are kind of more geared towards the betting. Do you have the DraftKings board up in terms of the pricing?
Yes. Yep, I'm good to go.
Excellent. So, Joel, let me start with you, Mr. I win $50,000 every other week, and I'm in the World Golf Championship. Who do you like in that 10K or above range? Here I am looking at Hideki Matsuyama, who you rode with last week, and who, by the way, gained over 13 strokes tee to green last week, which is like such a monster number. I feel like it's wrong, but it's not. Are you riding with him again? And if not, who are you riding with?
So it's funny. When the week started and the pricing came out, I was almost completely fading Matsuyama. But I've since completely changed my tune. Looking at the metrics, he might be the best player in this field by a lot. I mean, in terms of strokes gained, we don't have to worry about Morikawa's, Hovland's, Rahm's. None of those guys are in there, and he's in that tier. So, the only other guy I would even put in that tier to talk about is Louis. So, but there are two of the same, and Louis is going to be a little bit higher owned. So, I'm okay with the salary being really high because it's one of those weeks where I don't find a big difference between 7K and 8K. So we can finagle the numbers there, no problem, and squeeze who we want. And you won't be able to play both Matsuyama and Simpson, and then you're going to struggle to kind of build out the rest of the lineup. But
oh, yes, you can though. I'm just saying. It's probably not a good idea, but
if you listen to the show when we give you all the value plays, then you can do it. But yeah, that's where I'm leaning. So I like Matsuyama a lot. Webb just seems like someone you have to play here. You're going to eat some chalk, but I just seems he's pretty locked in. If you want to play the notion in a GPP that I'm going to fade Webb, then you will be different. But good luck if he wins the tournament, which he knows he's at least going to top 5, which he seems to do every year. And Louis, Louis has kind of showed up every week. He kind of fell apart on Sunday, but that's not really uncommon for Louis. So, Louis just tends to have 3 days, and then Sundays aren't his strong suit. So, again, this is now another field where, Louis has been getting second places in these majors with everyone playing. Now with all these guys, there's maybe 5 guys in his league. So I think Louis is pretty safe, but you got to pay up. So those are the guys I'm targeting because I'm targeting those 3. It's just hard to have any more of the upper tier in my player pool.
So Spencer, and I want to move to you. And for the record, you don't have to relegate your answers to "I like this guy" in DraftKings or DFS. You can talk about, "Hey, this is a guy I'm keying in on to bet and look for in matchups." However you want to do it is fine. But in this sort of upper crust, if you will, which of course now that Patrick Reed is out, is Jason Kokrak, Zalatoris, Webb Simpson, Louis Oosthuizen, and Hideki. Who do you like here, whether it's betting or DFS?
Well, I will say this: one of the biggest gripes I had when the DraftKings prices came out, I wish they would have made Webb Simpson like $12,000. Mm-hmm. It would have solved a lot of these issues of this ownership. Like if we look last year, he was nearly 30% at 11,200. Koepka was in that tournament. So, we had a good tournament that year too. So we have 30% there. When you get this $10,600 price tag, you're just asking for everybody to want to play him. He hasn't finished outside of third in the last 4 years here. As you guys mentioned, you're going to hear a million times in this industry. He named his daughter Wyndham. He has a home on this course. It's hard to find too many red flags. Like all iterations of my model, whether it be betting, DFS, GPPs, cash games, he's number one for me. It's going to come down to ownership. The way I view it is like him versus Louis. The price tag's about the same. The ownership's close enough. Joel did mention that Louis faltered a little bit on Sunday. I think the reason for that is the putter just gets a little worse usually. Obviously, the ball striking wasn't great either, but he gets carried by the putter. I didn't love where the ball striking was leading up to Sunday. I thought the putter was carrying him through that. On Sunday, kind of everything fell apart. I kind of would rather play Webb. I think he's the safest play on the board. I think you can pencil him into a cash game there and be fine. I really like Hideki if you're trying to be a little bit different in GPP contests. It's the first time I've seen him be the highest priced person on the board. I don't know if, in the last 5 years, if he has been, but I haven't seen a number on him. And I think if you remove Webb from the equation, like the price tag actually makes sense. Like I'd have had no problem if Hideki was $11,000 and Webb was $11,800 and we just start there and try to build it. I'm a little bit sad that Reed pulled out of the tournament. I thought he was going to be a good contrarian GPP dart throw. I'm going to be out on Zalatoris. Probably prefer Kokrak for cash than anything. But as Joel said, when you're going up to Simpson and Webb, it's kind of hard to fit too many of these other players into this range. And there's just some $9,000 golfers I like a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm actually curious who you like in the 9,000 range, which we'll get to in a second, because I was sort of struggling to find. I mean, I love the 8K and 7K range, which I think I probably speak for a lot of people when I say that. But the 9K range for me only had a couple people. I do want to get to some of the comments because we have a lot of comments right now from our loyal and some new viewers. But I'll tell you, I like Hideki a lot too. I mean, I probably like Webb Simpson the most. And I think I would probably have him a little bit more geared towards cash. But in GPPs, while I'll play a little bit of Webb Simpson, I really like Hideki, and I like Zalatoris too. I mean, I like how he's just not a good putter. But last week he gained over 3 strokes putting, and I'm not saying, listen, it's a sample size of 4 rounds. Like obviously it can regress just like like he's been putting before. But I do like that, and I know he's played a lot on this course. He's very familiar with this area and this course specifically, and I think he's coming in here with some confidence that maybe we haven't seen the last, 2 or 3 months where he's kind of been struggling. The one watch out for Zalatoris, and somebody posted an interview or excerpts from an interview with him, I think earlier today. It might have been Chris Murphy on Twitter who posted it. But, he's still dealing with that back injury that caused him to withdraw a couple tournaments ago. And he was kind of speaking to it. He definitely wants to play. He wants to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs and do all these things. But it's clearly still bothering him, so much so that he was actually talking about how it's sort of affecting his swing a little bit. Now, granted, he played really well last week, so obviously it's not, killing his chances, but that's just something to think about. You are rolling the dice a little bit, but I think Zalatoris is a sneaky play if the ownership is low. And unfortunately, his ownership looks to be kind of in that Hideki approaching that Louis range, which is a little discouraging. But if that's the case, Webb, Louis, and Hideki, but I think Hideki is a really smart GPP play. Before we get to the 9K range, a lot of accolades for Joel. Joel is the man. All Joel does is win from Ivan. And thank you, Theo, initially here. Let's see. We got Stoby listening in. Thank you for that. He's one of our writers. He's doing a lot of NFL work right now, along with Sticks Picks and a lot of our other team. So that actual million. So he's saying you lost $1 million a few weeks ago, but you're going to win $1 million soon. And then North Forker's in here. We got a bunch of guys. And then, of course, our old co-host, who's the most good looking in this show, says Mike Raziel. And he says, here we go. Here's the punchline. Trick question. It's everyone. All right. So we got a couple people thanking us for all the work we put in Discord. Thank you, Greg. It's no problem. So let's get to that 9K range, guys. Spencer, I'm going to start with you because you said, you actually implied, I don't know if it's true, that you like some guys in this 9K range. So who is it?
Yeah, I like two players. I think the safest is probably Brian Herman at 9,900. I think you can make an argument that he's playable across the board at 10% ownership. He knows how to make birdies in bunches and will receive a big boost with driver not being needed off the tee. And then probably for me, my favorite play, especially for GPPs, would be Sung Jae. If I've learned anything about Sung Jae, you put him on a short Bermuda track, throw everything else out the window, and he kind of can come to play on those. He's gained strokes with his irons in the last 5. That's a big improvement from what we've seen from him recently. He ranks 3rd in my model on fast Bermuda greens, 8th on Donald Ross designs, and is 1st in total driving when I weighted the accuracy. And so I'm going to have a ton of Sung Jae. I have an outright ticket on Sung Jae. That's where I started my card. Harmon, I'm fine with GPPs or cash. I don't have an outright on him. And then I guess the one question mark to me, or two question marks to me that I haven't quite made a decision on yet, would be Matthew Wolff at 9,300 and Adam Scott at 9,200. I know everybody's going to play Henley at 9,400. Great iron player, makes a lot of sense. I don't really have tons of arguments against that. But for me, Wolff and Scott are really the last two decisions I'm trying to make in that range.
And what is the analysis on Adam Scott in terms of what's going to potentially nudge you in the direction of actually like betting him or potentially playing him in DFS? Because I think most people are like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Well, I mean, ownership's a really good start when we're looking at less than 5%, but it's just the pedigree that he brings to the table with it. I don't think the form's quite as bad as it looks. I mean, if we just look at his recent form, 36 last week, 46 at the Open, 13th at the Travelers, a 16th at the Memorial. I think it's trending in the right direction for him at less than 5%. And he's kind of living in this like bizarro world right now where he seems to be able to putt and he can't ball strike. And if the putter can just remain where it is, and the putting stats for me just across the board are really good, like fast Bermuda in general, putting. He's 11th over a 2-year sample size for me. He's 11th over the last 24 rounds in this field. So there's a lot of things pointing in his direction. I just think if the irons can turn around a little bit, he's a guy that can get back on track. He's making a lot of cuts. And I do think that at $9,200, he does have playability in GPP contests.
Yeah, fair enough. And I'm trying to remember, I looked at the FedEx Cup playoff standings before the show, but is he on the outside looking in? He's right on the line, I think.
He's right. He's on one side of the line. I don't love that. That wouldn't be a reason that I necessarily would play him, but he's a consummate professional. Like, I don't think that that's going to deter him necessarily. He's going to go play his best golf, and he's been there, done that in the FedEx Cup before. If he does miss out, he's going to get into tournaments. He'll be fine. Fair
enough. I like it. And for the record, I like Harman and Henley too. I almost hesitate to say that though, because obviously they are probably going to be the most chalky in that range. I think I almost like Henley better from an outright ticket standpoint. What is he, 35? I think he's 30-1, which, isn't amazing. Did you get him at 30 do you see him at 30-1 as well, Spencer?
The best number I saw was 35 at one point, that he might have fallen to 30. I'm sure a lot of people are betting him, and I agree with you. I think he makes more sense as an outright bet than anything else.
Yeah, fair enough. And Joel, the 9K range, who do you like?
Yeah, so for me this week, I'm pretty much more of the stars and scrubs. So I'm going to try and cram in as much of the Hideki's, Louis, and Webbs as I can, and I'm probably going to not have too much action in this range. The guys in this range I do like, if any. I like Sung Jae, and I like Harman. So if I was going to play any of those, would be the two I'd go after in this range. But for the most part, I'm pretty light in the 9K range.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I'm pretty light. But to Spencer's point, there are some guys that, obviously Sung Jae carries some ownership because of his course history here. But there are some guys here, like an Adam Scott, that if Spencer's right, if the irons, and Spencer's not calling it, but he's just from an ownership standpoint, it does make sense. If the irons come around and the putter stays relatively hot, these finishing positions, when you really look at them, they're not Adam Scott type finishing positions, but they do show signs of progress from maybe where he was 3 and 4 months ago. So I think that's a really interesting GPP play. Like for me, am I doing that in a single entry? Like personally, probably not. I'm a little maybe too risk averse there, which maybe I need to change. I'll probably find my ownership leverage somewhere else, but I think in maybe a 3 max or like in a big MME, I think Adam Scott makes a lot of sense. So let's go to this 8K range, which I think as we go down to 8 and 7K range, I think it gets really rich with a lot of value, which is probably why you don't really need to dip into the 6K range. Even if you're doing a stars and scrubs approach, I don't think you really need to dip heavy in the 6K range. With that said, there's a few guys I really like in the 6K range, but let's start with this 8K range. And Spencer, I'll go to you again. You know, I look at this, and of course, there's one guy that's really going to jump out to everybody, and he's the new kid on the block, right? It's Seamus Power. Like, there's no reason to say, well, I don't like Seamus Power, because he's been striking it so well, and his finishes have been so well, including a takedown. Of course, ownership becomes a problem in GPPs. I think he's a great cash play, of course. The other two guys I like are Kevin Streelman and Charles Schwartzel, and we can get into the reasons for that later. But Spencer, let's hear it from you in the 8K range. Who are you honing in on?
Well, I will say with Seamus, Nick and I have been trying to get him on the Better Golf Pod here for like the last month. He's not returning our calls or our messages for it, so he's on our crap list right now. So
Seamus on you. Oh, you see what I did? Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one, but it's like, the thing is if everybody's going to play Seamus, I don't know. I mean, I can kind of talk myself out of him a little bit, I guess. More sense in cash than a GPP based off of that. I like 4 players. I guess a 5th one if you want to throw Kevin Streelman into the mix. I do think Streelman's GPP upside makes a lot of sense. I like Kevin Na a lot at 8,800. 7th overall for me in my statistical model. He ranks 7th also in scoring on easy courses. 30th in weighted proximity, and is the number 1 player around the green. I think people are going to be off of him from what they've seen recently with the irons. I'm not really as worried with that. I think that that's something he can turn around. Kind of like Ricky Fowler, same thing as Adam Scott. You're going to need a good quality finish for him to get into the playoff events. Don't view that as a positive either, but just another player that should be able to use his short game to find success. I liked Kevin Kisner at 8,400, kind of the exact mold of what I'm trying to find of these fairways, putter type Bermuda putters that I'm looking for. 2 top 10 he's here in his last 3 tries. Current form is leaving something to be desired, but the ownership makes him an intriguing leverage in GPPs. And then the one guy that I kind of with the same mold of what I said with Adam Scott that I am going to throw in is Justin Rose for me at $8,000. He's 1st for me in my model on Donald Ross courses, 4th on easy courses, 2nd on fast Bermuda greens. We're looking at like 3-4% ownership. He's a former major winner that I just think he's priced too cheaply. I'm going to throw darts on that when I get an opportunity to. Once again, that's probably more of like the MMEs than anything else with it. I don't think you need to play him for single entries. I think you can find other routes to go with it. But in MME tournaments, I do think that he's an intriguing dart throw to make.
Let me ask you something about Kevin Kisner, because I think he is a guy that people are really talking about. Obviously, he has really good course history here. 3rd here last year, and then he played in 2017, a very average finish, but then 10th in 2016, if you want to go back just 5 years. He's had 2 pretty bad starts in a row, but before that, he was 8th and he was 5th. Now, here's what I want to ask you, though, Spencer. So I know you take a longer view than most when you do your modeling, and I don't, it's really not for me to say, what ends up being better and what is going to be more predictive. I think it's really just a matter of preference. Some people do 24 rounds. Some people want to do 50. Some people want to do 100. I know, Spencer, with your success, it leads me to believe that your way is very, very proficient. So this is why I'm asking you the following question. So last week, Kevin Kisner lost almost 12 strokes tee to green. That's such a small sample size, though, right? It's 4 rounds. And is it fair to, because you take a longer view, when you see something like that from a Kevin Kisner, who's typically a pretty good ball striker on these shorter courses like we'll have this week, do you just throw that out? Do you completely ignore it because, hey, it's just a small sample size, it happens to everybody, not too worried about it? Or does that, losing 12 strokes tee to green is obviously like a gigantic number.
I factor it in. I factor everything in. But yeah, I run things from a 2-year perspective. As the year goes on, it shrinks to more of a 1-year sample size with it. So we're at the end of this season. It's pretty much a 1-year sample size at this point of what I'm looking at right now. Look, that's a difficult course they played with a lot of water there. If I'm not looking at an exact corollary type fit of the course I'm trying to find, I kind of throw those numbers out and they are what they are now. If Kisner's a guy where the numbers just continually are bad for tons of weeks over and over again, I'll give it a look, but I kind of trust my numbers above anything else just because it's kind of the deal breaker, or I guess like if it's a decision to be made, I will go look at a shorter sample size. Like when Homa won at the Genesis a couple months ago, my initial model from a 2-year perspective did not like him. When I shrunk it down to being a more current form for him, he graded as a top 10 play for me. So I always go through with these guys and will weigh them for shorter term than I do just to get an idea of where I think they should be. But I don't mind it from Kisner. I think this is such a great course fit for him where he can find success. We've seen this in the past. He's entered into these types of tournaments like this where the form isn't there. And then the irons become a little bit better. The putter gets hot and he competes to win the tournament. So I don't have as big of concern with Kisner as some people will. I know a lot of people like him this week. He's kind of is that hot point of the discussion of some people are in, some people are out. I think that's everybody's prerogative to figure it out. And I think that's what's so great about this industry as a whole is everybody has models, everybody has things of what they're doing, and it's trust your math on it. And if you think your math is right, you go with it. And if you think it's wrong, then maybe you make a different decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I would have thought Kisner's ownership percentage would be a little higher. Obviously, it's super early. Steven comes out with the article tomorrow on Win Daily Sports, and he'll publish those final numbers. But I would have thought Kisner, just because of his name recognition and his course history, would be like well over 10%. And what I'm looking at is well under 10%. So I guess it remains to be seen whether that momentum gets built. But Joel, what were you going to say?
Well, I'll add to that. I think if you want to take a deeper look into Kisner, I think something to notice in terms of like losing that many strokes, he blew up on Sunday. It wasn't like it was, 374s and he's not playing well. He was competing, and then he had one day where he blew up. And like that is less of a red flag to me. It's like, listen, he had one day where he completely lost it. But other than that, he was playing, pretty well. So from that case, I'm okay with Kisner. But to caveat that narrative, I went back and just looked at his last couple rounds. Over his last 5 tournaments, on all of them, he has at least 174 or worse, which is going to be tough to compete in a tournament like this with a 74 or worse, except for one where he got 8th at the Rocket Mortgage. He had all rounds under 70. But other than that, he tends to do have like a blow-up day. Which
Joel, too soon. All rounds under 70. I can't believe you just authored those words. That cost you $900,000. Wow, you are very brave, sir.
I heard it as I said it. It was
Okay, so Joel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's the first thing I thought of when you said that. But okay, that's a fair point. So in that 8K range, is Kisner one of your guys? And if not, who do you like in the 8K range?
So I do like Kisner. I think Spencer made a lot of good points. I think the track just suits him well. And again, looking at his numbers, he does have a lot of sub 70 rounds, so he can go low. You got to hope he doesn't have that blow up day this week. If he doesn't, he can compete. I mean, he does have 2 top 10s in his last 5. So we've seen him do it, and you've seen him do it recently, but he's just kind of a mixed bag. Again, I'm not going to be too heavy in this range. I do think Kevin Na is interesting, mainly because of his course history. But as we know with Na, he could withdraw with a back injury after day 1. So he's another really volatile, definitely a GPP play, not someone I would recommend for cash purposes. I think going down here, yes, I mean, everyone loves Seamus Power. There's not much not to like about him this week. I think in terms of value, he's one of the better values just because you're getting someone at 8,500 who you can play with your webs and things like that. I wouldn't be opposed to Streelman. I'm not going to be overweight on him, but I think in terms of a golfer in this field, I think the price is a little low. If he was 8,800 or 9K, I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. I remember we were talking like, what was it, a month ago? He was like the 2nd or 3rd highest price golfer. It was one of those JV tournaments, but like, it just goes to show you its timing. He had a good week the week before, so they made him the 2nd highest draft for now. He's coming off not the best week, but he is certainly capable of being in the top 10 in this tournament just based on talent level. But the last play that not mentioned in this range that I actually really like this week is Charles Schwartzel. He's been playing consistent for the last couple of months, and he also has a good history here where, let's not forget, Charles not a young buck, so it was a while ago, but in 2012 he was 14th, in 2015 he was 3rd, and then last year he's missed the cut. Now, he's playing much better this year than he was last year, so it's almost like a different golfer. And we know when he's playing well, he does well on this course. So if you want to look at it that way, he's playing well now, and he has a history when he is playing well to do well here. I like Charles a lot. But other than that, I'm probably not going to be too heavy in this range either.
Yeah, and for the record, Spencer, at the end of or towards the end of last week's show, which Nick was on, by the way, we did a good chalk, bad chalk segment where I just kind of read off 7 or 8 names of guys that were trending towards 20% or way in excess of 20%. And we just kind of went around and we said, Nick, or, in this case, it'll be you and Joel will say, this is chalk I'm willing to eat, or chalk I'm willing to play, and chalk I'm not willing to play. So we'll do that once we do the 6K range, and then we'll do some, outrights, first round leaders, and maybe some bets that you like. So that's the 8K range, boys. By the way, I think Kevin Na is pretty sneaky. I'm gonna have to take a second look at that one, because again, in this 8K range, it appears that I like the most popular guys, and that's not necessarily a winning recipe. And of course, I'm referring to Seamus Power, Kevin Streelman, and Charles Schwartzel. I think Na is a very, very interesting pivot there. I don't think I'm willing to get behind Rose, but in terms of Adam Scott and Justin Rose, in terms of guys who have this pedigree that just haven't been playing well and are on the outside looking in of the FedEx Cup playoffs, I do like Adam Scott. That, to me, that one makes a lot of sense. And again, you're going to pick up so much leverage with that play. So guys, the 7K range is just absurdly big. So let's just do our best. Joel, I'm going to start with you this time. In the 7K range, there's obviously a lot of guys that are going to pop to some people. Just to name a few: Mito Pereira, Johnny Vegas, people might like. Of course, my guy, Hank Lebioda, people are going to be on him. There's some Patton Kizzire, a big time birdie maker. And I'm just kind of scrolling down the list. Does anybody want to play Doug Gim, who can't punt? Shez Reavie is an interesting play who I like. CT Pan is kind of an under the radar guy that I like. Rory Sabatini, an under the radar play I like. And then you get down to like the Ryan Armours, who are really great course fits, who again, I also like. And then I'll throw out a couple other names. Bo Hogan, Joel Dahman, I think are kind of sneaky in this tournament. So I just gave out like basically the whole field. So my apologies there. But Joel, let's start with you. Maybe 4 or 5 guys you really like in this 7K range.
Yeah. So I'll just start at the top. And one guy you didn't mention that I like a lot, good course history, playing well this year, Brent Snedeker.
Yeah.
He's won this tournament in 2018. He was third in 2016. The last 5 times he's played, he made the cut. Some of those are in the 40s, but he competes here. He seems to like this course. His recent form has 2 top 20s in his last 2 outings. So I think there's a lot to like about Brent, especially at under 8K in this field. If you don't know who Mito is yet, he's going to be pretty popular now. He's been playing great. He was a Korn Ferry guy. He won 2 tournaments on the Korn Ferry Tour back to back. Now he's playing with the big boys. His first tournament up here, he didn't do so well, which kind of put him under the radar. But ever since then, he's been killing it. So as a value, I think he's one of my favorite plays in the 7K range. I like Vegas as well. Vegas is on an absolute tear. My concerns with Vegas are he hasn't had too much success here, even though the one time he did in 2014, he had the top 10. So if he's hitting it well, which he's doing right now, he can compete on this course. Another one that not mentioned is JT Poston. JT Poston has been playing pretty well recently. He was in a playoff with Seamus Power at that JV tournament a few weeks ago. His ball striking numbers are really good. He's also a guy that's won this tournament just 2 years ago. So he definitely has an eye for this course. I do think he might be a little overpriced at $7,800, but he's someone to keep an eye on. Another person, Mackenzie Hughes, who his recent form has been really strong. I mean, his last 4 outings, he's got 3 top 15s. One at the U.S. Open, the Rocket Mortgage. He was 14th. He was 6th at the Open. He had tied for 22nd here last year, and he can get hot with that putter, which guys who can get really hot with the flat stick can go really high. So for GPP purposes, I think he can be really interesting. Everyone's on your boy. I mean, Hank Lebioda, I am too. I mean, there's a lot to like about him at this price. I kind of felt I already put an outright ticket on him. I think I bought into the narrative that his dad got really sick, and that's why he withdrew from the tournament. And I think now he comes out and wins one for his dad. So I like that now. It's a feel-good story. And so that's where my heart lies. I know, I'm sorry. It's a mouthful. I still have a few more guys in this range. Should I keep going? I kind of skipped the other ranges.
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, so yeah, it's interesting because there was a question earlier about, like what kind of build you were, it's in the chat, what kind of build you were going to do. And I know you mentioned stars and scrubs. So to me, it sounds like you're grabbing a couple guys way up top, and then the rest of your build is in the 7K range. I mean, that's basically what it sounds like.
My main lineup does have, I'm going back and forth between Louis and Webb. And then it's going to have Seamus Power. And then for the most part, it's all 7K range.
Gotcha. Okay. So Spencer, I want to go to you because he mentioned Johnny Vegas, and there are guys that are like elite scores, like your Patton Kazires, your Johnny Vegases, but there are guys that don't necessarily pepper fairways. So I'm just curious, in your modeling, did those guys, obviously their birdie or better percentage or birdie or better gain, whatever you're looking at, it's probably going to be really good, but then it's offset by what I just said about the fairways. Did your total driving stat or whatever you put emphasis on driving accuracy, did it just lower those guys too much to play them, or you still like guys like that?
That's kind of the thing with like Adam Scott, Jonathan Vegas, like all those guys that I'm looking for, or I'm looking at in some respect here. I'm willing to take a second look when the accuracy numbers are bringing them down. So it did bring Vegas down for me. He's 49th overall in my model. Really the biggest deterrence, 95th in total driving, 112th in the weighted proximity numbers, which is what really killed him there. Not the greatest from the par 4 range that I had, but yeah, I mean, he's a birdie maker, a ball striker, a guy that seems to find success at these types of tracks. So I'm not going to necessarily talk anybody out of him. I had him as a negative value on the surface of it. And if we're talking about Hank Lebioda, I'm smart enough to not come on this show and say about bad word about Hank Lebioda to you. So I will bypass my view on him this week. We'll just say that he's in this tournament, in my opinion, with it. Obviously, he's going to be very popular at the end of the day. But, I guess I will answer this question a little bit more from a betting perspective and give some guys that I have bets on from the top 40 market. Because I do think when you look into this range, if you can find guys that can land in a top 40, that's a good start to the puzzle of what we're trying to do here. So I do have Brent Snedeker, as Joel said. I really like him. I think this is a good course fit. He's averaged 3.83 shots with his putter over 8 starts here. That's not something with putting I'm necessarily going to always be looking for. I don't love the putting statistic as a whole, but it just shows he likes these greens. 5 of those finishes he's had have resulted in a top 40. He's gained tee to green in 9 of his last 10 starts. Mark Hubbard at this is a plus 180 number on DraftKings for a top 40. I love Hubbard this week. 8 made cuts in his last 9 starts, 4th in 3-putt avoidance, 17th in driving accuracy, back-to-back top 25s at Sedgefield. I also like Joel Damon. I think he's a guy where we look at this top 40 number on him. He's plus 135 on DraftKings. And I think the thing that's interesting is he's a $7,200 golfer. Usually we see guys in that range more in the plus 180, plus 190 range. I think that's the sportsbooks telling you they like him this week. I think that's a guy that they have priced too cheaply. I have him priced too cheaply. He's one of the better values for me. And then I know Ryan Armour is going to be very popular, but I had him as a value. I kind of can understand why. Great course history. And I guess just throwing in a couple other guys. I will sprinkle some Chris Kirk in as an outright or a GPP. I just think Bermuda courses for him is something I'm always looking for. I think Mito Pereira has proven that he belongs on tour. I think he's hard to ignore at 7,900. And I guess, really, if you want to start getting cute with it, maybe you take a shot with Doug Gim because of his irons. Maybe you take a shot with Lucas Glover, but those are like strictly GPP type targets that I would be playing. I don't want any part of them in a cash game.
And Joel, I'm going to kick it back to you for some 7K guys we might have missed in terms of people you like. But let me ask you, Spencer, first, is Brendan Todd on the radar at all? Because he does seem like a really good course fit. He just hasn't been playing well.
Yeah, Todd was one of the guys when I was just looking for what I think his fit is for this course that jumped higher. I think he's the biggest differential I had, which still didn't make him the biggest value in the world. But I think when you're looking for fairways gain, guys that are good Bermuda putters, I think he definitely fits the narrative of what you're trying to find here. So I have him at a little less than 5% ownership. I'm sure that number will increase a little bit because I have seen his name floating around in the market a lot lately, but I don't have a problem with him. I'm going to avoid him for head-to-head bets or cash games just because I do think the form isn't what I'm trying to find, but I don't have a problem with him in GPPs at all.
Fair enough. And Joel, let's close out the 7K range. Who else do you have in mind?
So a few guys we might have missed. I'm not sure if you mentioned Zach Johnson. I think I
know. I like that too.
I'm surprised Spencer didn't mention Ryan Moore, a Vegas guy who should find a lot of fairways. His recent form looks really good. I think at a pretty low ownership, he's getting overlooked. So I really like him from a GPP perspective. Another guy I just think is underpriced. He's playing really well this year is Brendan Grace. He missed the cut at the Open in a tough course, but before that he had 2 top 10s. I think he could have been $1,000 more expensive. Now, doesn't have a great history here, but I just think he's playing much better this year than he has in years past, and we're getting a different golfer on this track. Going down a little bit further, I know you guys mentioned some other guys that I'm on as well, so I'll skip over those. But two other guys that we didn't mention are Bo Hoag, whose ball striking has been excellent. 2 top 20s in his last 2 outings. One was the Barbasol, which I'm not sure I can fully count. But just at a 7,100 number, I think that's you got to cling to something. So he's definitely has the ball striking to like. But my favorite value play this week, a guy I'm going to be very overweight on, is mi amor, Ryan Amor.
Yes, yes, of course.
7K, I think a lot of his statistics just make sense this week. I don't overweight the model that I make, but he did just happen to turn out to be number 2 in it. His course history here is really strong. In the last 4 years, every finish is in the top 25. That includes 2 top 10s. His last 2 actual outings are 2 top 10s. His ball striking has been for him very strong, and he's going to find a lot of fairways. So I think he's checking a lot of boxes for me this week, and at 7K flat, I think that's my best value play of the week.
Let me ask you both before we go to the 6K range. So there's 2 guys that did really well in the Olympics that really nobody thought would do well, and that's CT Pan and Rory Sabatini. Now, again, I'm narrative shopping a little bit here. I just want to see if you guys agree with me if I'm just taking this just way too far. So obviously, with the Olympics, there's certain motivations that go with certain narratives that kind of play into that, playing for your country and, things like that, certain pressures that come along with that. Now, these are the same 2 guys that, finished really well, 2nd and 3rd at the Olympics, but are also coming into these playoffs with the pressure of trying to, actually make the top 125, the FedEx Cup playoffs. So my thought is, okay, we have pretty good recent form. They have proven recently, just 2 weeks ago, that some of these added narratives, some of these added pressures affect them in a positive way, because we know those can affect people in a negative way as well. We know that they're going to be under 5% owned. And, both of them, by the way, have finished really high at this very tournament within the last few years. In Sabatini's case, twice, and CT Pan's case, once. And I'm talking top 5s, I believe. I'm double checking that right now. Yeah. CT Pan 2nd 3 years ago. And Roy's, I had a couple top 5s here, I believe. So are either of those guys on your radar as just ownership leverage? And did I just make a case, or is that narrative shopping just a little bit too much for you?
So I can start. For me, there's a few factors that make it hard for me to overweight what happened at the Olympics. One, it was a no-cut event. And if you recall, Sabatini went like 10 under. And what was that, Sunday?
Yeah.
So here, he might not have even made Sunday because he would have gotten cut. So that's part of it. And just keep in mind, this is an event where, like, last week was a no-cut event. This is an event where we need to find cut makers. Like, we need to get back to making sure we get guys that get through. Of the 2 of them, I think I do prefer Sabatini if I was going to play one or the other. But I'm not going to be overweight on either. And I know this should be a lower scoring event as well, but another thing that makes it hard to overweight what happened at the Olympics is it played so easy that it just felt like it was different golf than what we're used to seeing on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this will be a birdie fest, but that's fair. Spencer, anything to add there?
No, and I agree with what Joel said. Like, if you put a gun to my head, make me make a decision, I would rather play Sabatini of the 2. CT Pan's a guy that Nick and I discussed on the Better Golf Pod. I know he liked him. I couldn't come around on him. I just had problems when it came to his overall birdie or better percentage. 110th in my model for me there. Didn't like his 3-putt avoidance, 66th, and then 78th in total driving. So there just wasn't a ton that I liked for him. I mean, sure, anytime you can make a narrative that you think is outside of the box from what the rest of the industry is saying, and obviously you are making a narrative that's different because you're talking about 2 guys that are under 5% ownership. Never the worst thing in the world to be a little bit different based off of that, but I'm not going to get there. If I am, I'm more inclined to get there with Sabatini. I just am not going to play Pan this week.
So we got a question here before we fly through the 6K range. Louis, so this is something I've heard a couple times. Is he over golf? Now, Louis didn't play in the Olympics, did he? So I wonder, I mean, compared to some of these guys, I don't think he's ever, people asking the same question in Discord about Louis. Do you guys have any concern about Louis? I mean, obviously he had a bad Sunday. Do you attribute that to him being tired, or was it just a bad Sunday? Joel, I'll start with you.
I think there's factors where I could see why you would have concerns with Louis. I don't think it's fatigue. I think this guy's a professional golfer. This is what he does for a living. I don't think these guys get fatigued playing golf. So that wouldn't be the reason. But I think the other concerns are, and I know this isn't a metric that you can follow, but at the end of the day, Louis isn't Tiger Woods. And, this run is going to come to an end. And it's been awesome, right? It is. And he's been playing great. But the ball striking metric maybe started to dip a little bit last week. And, he's just not something he's going to keep up for 2 years. So it might not be this week. He might come out and have another top 5, but he's not going to keep going and be the best golfer in the world moving forward. I just don't think that's him. So the regression's coming. It's just a matter of when, and you want to be on that timing when it comes. You don't want to be overweight on him when he hits. So now this field is pretty weak. So as well as he's been playing, this can be the week where he pops. I'm not saying he's done here, but it's coming.
Spencer, any thoughts there?
Yeah, and I run an in-tournament model trying to find these guys that are overachieving or underachieving. And a lot of times I look at the putting stats and the ball striking numbers, try to figure that out. And Louis is a guy that's always going to look better when the putter brings him up. Like the ball striking is never quite as there as you want it to be. But just I noticed last week, like going into Sunday, and to Joel's point, like the Sunday round was bad. It's one round with it. But like all the rounds before that were not great either. Like my model had him as a fade going into Sunday, and just knowing that you need to make putts when you're somewhat in contention, he always gets worse with that. And I really think that's why he doesn't win the tournament. The putter leads him up until Sunday, and then when the pressure push comes to shove with it, we see him miss these putts and ultimately not win the tournament. So I did not like what I saw from him off the tee and approach last week. I do think there are some red flags. As Joel said, not the best golfer in the world. Maybe it continues in a weaker field like this. My model likes him. He's in the top 5. I just think there are some red flags, more so than people would care to acknowledge.
So in this, going back to the 10K range and above, in DFS, where do you have him in the order? Do you have him behind Hideki and behind Webb Simpson?
Yeah, so I have Webb 1, Hideki 2, and Louis 4.
Gotcha. And who is 3, by the way?
Sungjae.
Oh, wow. Okay. I know you like Sungjae. I didn't expect him to be that high in your model. Okay, great. Okay, so listen, look, there's only a few guys I like in the 6K. Let's fly through this pretty quick, and then we'll get to some outrights first-round leaders. Maybe Spencer will give us some his favorite top 40s or top 20s. So, Joel, I'll start with you. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll start with you in the 6K range. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one value down here at 6.9 is Brian Stewart. This is a guy who has been pretty hot recently. He's got 3 top 15s in his last 3, 2 of which are top 10s. His history here is mediocre, but he's going to find a lot of fairways. His game seems set up for this course. So if you're looking at a guy who's found a little bit of a hot streak, this should continue for him. So I like him. For the most part, the 6K range, I am not going to be overly heavy on. A couple of the names I'm looking at are Roger Sloan at 6,700. I know that's one of your guys. He's been top 40 here each of the last 2 times he's played. In his last 2 outings, he had 16th and 31st. His ball striking has been really good. He's going to need to improve his short game to compete. But if he makes a few putts this week, I think he can be a sneaky play. Someone who'll be a little bit more popular, I won't be overweight on, but if you need to dip down here, Henrik Norlander. Again, he is driving ball striking for this range is well above average. He was 5th at the Barbasol. He's making a lot of cuts. That's definitely someone you can look to for value. But the last one I'll name before kind of passing it over is minimum priced.
Can we guess?
Guess? Let's go for the guessing game.
Because I think you're going to go with Michael Gellerman. It's got to be Michael. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Exactly. Right. So I guess it's probably a little obvious if you're going to go for the minimum value. Gellerman's the play. Listen, for someone at the exact minimum price, his ball striking numbers are really good. Now, he obviously has flaws. There's a reason he's minimum price. He's far from a lock. I probably wouldn't play him in too many cash games. But if you're looking to do something like Hideki and Webb or something like that, where you need to squeeze someone in to make it work, taking a flyer on Gellerman in a GPP, I'm okay with, because the ball striking, the iron play has been really good. The rest hasn't, and he needs to find something. But if he has one of those weeks where the putter gets hot and the ball striking is like we've seen, I really think he can get you a top 20, which would be good enough in a field if you have two of the top dogs.
No, I love that. It's funny. You just mentioned 5 guys in the 6K range. 4 of them that was 4 out of the 5 guys I was going to say. So we don't need to rehash that. I do like Stewart. I like Norlander. I like Sloan. I like Gellerman if you feel like going down there, which you totally don't have to. I'll throw out Mark Anderson as another complete punt. He's 6,300. But I really like, I think Stewart, Norlander, and Sloan are really great plays, particularly Stewart, who I'm really starting to warm up to. Spencer, any of those guys on your radar? And if not, who is?
Yeah, I have Sloan as a guy that just missed the top 40 market for me. I think at $6,700, he makes some sense. I think you can throw him in the cash games and expect a pretty good finish from him. When you get down to this range, obviously there's going to be more volatility, but I think he's one of the safer options, if we can call him that. I love Brian Stewart also at 6,900. 8th in total driving for me, as well as 13th on those critical par 4s that I'm looking at. Norlander at 6,600, as you said. He's probably one of my favorite plays in this range. 5 straight made cuts, including the 5th that Joel mentioned at the Barbasol. And then if I'm just going to rapid fire some other guys off here, Jim Herman at 6,900. I know you had him last week. I know Nick had him also. I think this is just a better course fit for him. He's the defending champion coming into this week. He had good form before that. I think that this is a much better venue for him to find success. Bryce Garnett, 6,800, 3 top 20s here since 2016. Back-to-back top 34 finishes on tour. I'm going to take this narrative with all these guys of I'm trying to kind of catch lightning in the bottle. I'm okay looking at Francesco Molinari at 6,800. He's a good total driver. I don't really know what to expect from him. He's a wild card that I'm going to be GPP only on, but at least I know his pedigree when he's good is at the top of in his prime, he's a $10,000 golfer, $9,000 golfer. So maybe he can turn it around a little bit. And then, if I'm getting real desperate down here, just like dart throwing to the max with guys with ultimate volatility, Martin Laird at 6,600, little to no ownership. He'll be volatile. And then Denny McCarthy, the form has just been awful, but great course history with a 9th, 22nd, 36 in his last 3. Maybe the putter turns around and he can find success. And the only other thing I'll say about Gellerman, because I considered him also, and he was one of my favorite targets at the 3M Open. I had a big wager on him to come top 40, top 20, and top 10 in that tournament. The reason why I liked him there is because putting was negated at that course. I think putting is not negated here. I worry a little bit that the 3-putt avoidance is going to bite him a little bit. The putter's just so bad, but he's top 5 in my model in GIR percentage. That's something worth considering. And if the putter can just be average at $6,000, I don't mind taking a shot, but I'm a little bit hesitant that the putter just burns him, because at the end of the day, he is Michael Gellerman, and he's doing this every single week where the putter burns him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not going to take a guy who's a bad putter that's like 7,800 or 8,600. But if for whatever reason I built a lineup where I have to jam in on Michael Gellerman, I'm acknowledging to myself it's a hope and pray situation. He just has to almost get lucky with the putter for 2 or 3 days to survive. Making the cut and paying off his price. But I totally agree with you there. Avoiding bad putters here is probably going to be the way to go. So guys, let's get to the super fun part. First of all, was there anybody I missed? And I did want to point out, you guys talked about JT Poston. I think you talked about him being a defending champion. That would have been 2 years ago before Jim Herman, who won last year. But Brent Snedeker also won here 3 years ago. And so I just think that needs to be brought up as well, because I think Snedeker is a great play, but I don't think people realize the guy won this tournament just a few years back. So important to note. Anybody we forgot you guys want to bring up before we get into outrights and first round leaders?
Nothing on my end.
You almost forgot good chalk, bad chalk.
Oh, I almost forgot good chalk, bad chalk. So yeah, let's do that. So let's start at the top. So we are talking good chalk, bad chalk, but we're not speaking in terms of cash. This is for GPP. Okay. So good call out, by the way. I don't think Hideki rises to chalk. So we're going to start with Louis, who looks to be approaching 20%. All these guys are approaching 20% or in excess of 20%. Louis, good chalk or bad chalk? Joel, I'm going to start with you every time.
Bad chalk.
I'm also going to say bad chalk, and that's because I want to go to Webb more than anything.
Yeah, well, that's the correct answer. It is bad chalk. Webb Simpson. So good chalk or bad chalk? I think we know Spencer's answer. Joel, what's your answer?
Good chalk.
Yeah.
And Spencer. Okay. Jason Kokrak. We didn't really talk about him. He looks obviously he's a birdie maker. Good chalk or bad chalk, Joel?
If he wasn't chalk, it would have been good, but bad chalk.
Yeah, I mean, I probably will take the same answer as him. Like, my model doesn't dislike him, but I don't love him at like 15%.
Russell Henley, good chalk or bad chalk?
Bad chalk.
In a GPP, I will say good chalk.
Oh, so I'm so on the fence here. I'm going to give you the same preface to the answer, but with a different result, Spencer. I'm going to say because it's a GPP, it's bad chalk. But again, I'm playing him more, I think, in the betting market than I am in DFS. Let's see. Seamus Power. He's going to be popular. Good chalk or bad chalk, Joel?
Good chalk.
Bad chalk. If he comes on the show, he can be good chalk again.
Oh, now it's getting personal. I love it. Okay, so we are down to Kevin Streelman's. His number's pretty high, higher than I thought it would be. So let's go there. Good chalk or bad chalk, Joel?
Bad chalk.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately bad chalk. I think he makes more sense as an outright bet than anything.
Fair enough. Charles Schwartzel looks like he's got a pretty high percentage. Joel, again, this is GPP context. Good chalk or bad chalk?
I'm going to add a little context to it. It's good chalk, and the context being I think I said this last week. It's easier to be good chalk at a lower price tag. So because it's value, you can fit guys in. So because of his price tag, it's good chalk.
Okay.
I will agree with good.
All right. So let's go to, did I skip over my guy? Oh no, here we go. Hank Lebioda. He is definitely looks like to be in excess of 20%. Joel, good chalk or bad chalk?
Good chalk.
I mean, I'm going to get booted off the show. I didn't make it through the duration, but bad chalk.
Oh, well, that's the end of the show, folks. I want to thank it. Okay, no, actually, that happens to be the last guy that's really chalky, but that's fair. I mean, listen, it's a super high percentage, and 7K chalk usually doesn't pay off, but this is Hank Lebioda, aka Superman. So I'm going to say Hank is good chalk because I want to get him on our show. With that said, okay, let's get to outrights real quick. Spencer, I'm going to start with you. Any outrights that I know, first of all, everybody should know that's watching. We have a lot of people watching. The Better Golf Pod, they're going to lay out all their top 40s, all their top 20s, the head-to-head people that they like, and some head-to-head matchups as well. And then, of course, outrights, first-round leaders, all that stuff. So listen to that podcast because you'll get the sort of the full picture. But as far as outrights, Spencer, anybody you laid anything on?
Yeah, I will condense this, not give every single name here. The two that I will give out on this show, just since I have spoken about them in a positive light, I have Sung J M at 31-1, really like him at this venue, and I also have Kevin Na at 45-1. I just think the recent approach numbers have not been good, but he's not a great iron player in general. Willing to ignore that, and just between 100 to 175 yards seems to be the metrics where he succeeds from the best. So Na and Sung Jae is where I started my card from an outright perspective.
Awesome. Joel, any outrights?
I actually have 4 outrights this week.
Right.
My first, the long shot of the week is Ryan Armour at 100-1. My second I'm going to give is Hammer and Hank. I think it's a narrative for me. I have the image in my head of him winning it for his dad. We led the withdrawal from last week. So I like Hank at 70-1. I just think the number is too good on Mito. We're getting 65-1 and a guy that, to me, looks like he could be a top 5 golfer in this whole field. So at that number, I like Mito a lot. And the last one is the darling, the golf darling these days, Seamus Power at 45-1.
This is so frustrating because Joel and I have basically the same picks, but he wins $50,000 like every week. And I'm like, breaking even or winning a couple hundred here and there. I don't understand how this works because literally I have 4 outrights. Lebioda 70-1, Mito 65-1, Power 45-1. The only one he didn't mention, and honestly, I don't even love this outright. It's just I don't want to play him in DFS that much. So it's Russell Henley. We've already talked about him. 30-1. I mean, such a good course fit. He certainly could pop. I don't love the number. I wish it was 35 or 40-1, but those are my 4 outrights. So Joel and I are really simpatico. I don't have Ryan Armour on here, but I mean, 100-1 seems like a pretty good number for a guy that kind of dominates this course. So that's pretty awesome. So let's go to first round leader. Joel, I'm going to start with you this time. Any first round leaders?
So the first round leader market, a few guys I'll put out there. One, a name I think could be interesting, Brandon Grace at 65-1. I don't love him full week, but I do think he's playing well enough where he can definitely have a hot day. Let's hope it's round 1 for 65-1. Another guy at the same range is JT Poston, also at 65-1. And the last first round leader play that I want to give is, I guess I'm giving a pretty common theme here at 80-1 is again my guy, Ryan Armour.
Nice. Spencer, first round leaders.
So I have not looked at this market yet. I don't have the prices up in front of me, but I just ran a very quick model as you were doing that of some of the guys that popped up as the best values in a first round leader market. Brendan Todd would be one of them.
Yes.
Ryan Moore, which I didn't mention Ryan Moore originally because I had mentioned Adam Scott. If I just mentioned UNLV players, I think that's another thing that'll probably get me banned. So I'm trying just not to get banned on my second time here. But
I love UNLV. The running Rebs, man. I love it. All right, keep going. Sorry about that.
The third one would be Chris Kirk. And then my model does like Justin Rose from an upside perspective. Those were the four guys of top 40 golfers for me that kind of made the biggest jump that looked playable.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find Brendan. Oh, there it is. Brendan Todd, 65-1. That's a shorter number than I thought it would be. So that probably speaks to that actually being a pretty good play in handicappers' eyes. So I'm going to add that to my card. I have 5 first-round leaders. Kevin Streelman at 50-1. Hank Lebioda at 65-1. He'll obviously be the wire-to-wire champion. Shez Reavie, 70-1. Brian Stewart at 100-1, I think is pretty interesting. And the breaking news on a Tuesday night that I'm delivering for Thursday evening, 48 hours early, the first round leader, the lock first round leader for the Wyndham Championship in 2 days from this moment in time right now. It's none of those guys I mentioned. They'll all probably fall in a tie for second place as first round leader. It's going to be Joel Damon at 65-1. He is your first round leader. He can catch fire, and I expect him to on Thursday. So Joel, Spencer, you're welcome, because that's definitely a lock. Put everything you own on Joel Damon as first round leader. And any thoughts? Spencer, what are you going to spend your money on the Joel Damon first round leader?
I'm gonna have to think about this. I mean, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, if I'm gonna spend it up front, it's got to be something good.
Yeah, no, it's true. You have to spend it up front. We don't want to be too smart with our money here because it's first round leader money. Joel, what are you spending your money on?
I'm going to get myself a helicopter to take me to the Fantasy Golf World Championship next week with my winnings from Joel Damon.
That is very, very smart. I love it. Well, listen, guys, Spencer, any final thoughts about the Wyndham Championship? Anything else to say just about the field, FedEx Cup playoffs, really anything?
I would like to double down on the Joel Damon call you just had. When I ran it from an upside perspective, he's 5th overall for me. So I love that prediction. Mark him down for me also. I'll piggyback off of you there. The only other thing I guess I will mention, just on a JT Poston thing, I do have a JT Poston head-to-head bet plus 100 over Sebastian Munoz. That's probably my favorite head-to-head this week. I don't love Poston as a golfer as a whole. I think these guys that are, historically are led by the putters are volatile. Just think this is a good course fit for him. Obviously, he won it a couple years ago. Did miss the cut last year, but I'm out on Munoz. I think it's a good spot for Poston. So that's my big head-to-head this week.
And Joel, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, one thing for everyone to keep in mind is we're coming off a couple of no-cut events. I know I said this earlier, but keep in mind, having a cut event again, it's different. Cut makers are super important. You can't just take shots on the long shots because they get 4 days, because they don't get 4 days here.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind. It's a little bit different build than we got the last couple of weeks. But other than that, we gave you all the value plays. We gave you all the winners. Let's make some money and count our money again next week. That's
actually a really good point, because we've had no cut events for what seems like a little while now. And so all of a sudden we have a Friday sweat, and that's kind of weird. So I'm glad you kind of brought that into people's consciousness. Before we go, Spencer, where can everybody find you? So I know we can find you on the Better Golf Pod, and at Tee Off Sports on Twitter. Anywhere else where people can find you?
Yeah, I just started a new show this week for Golf WRX called Be the Number. So you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Be the Number Pod. That's a show that I do. We cover the DraftKings market. My co-host on that is Josephine Chang, who's a former golfer at the University of Kentucky. I bring in all the stats and the metrics. She brings in all the course history. And I mean, she's super articulate and smart when it talks about these courses. And it's a show that I'd love for you to check out. You can also find that on the Golf WRX Radio. That would be the YouTube channel, and Golf WRX Radio on iTunes.
So I'm looking this up right now. So Josephine's Twitter is at jchang1020. So that's JCHANG 1020. So definitely give her a follow. Yeah, I saw clips of that. I think you might have cut a clip of that from last week because is it Josephine? Yeah, Josephine, correct me if I'm wrong, but did she not call Abraham Answer to win last week's tournament?
3 of her favorite plays last week were Hideki, Answer, and Burns. So that's a pretty good first show. And, you know, she's very good at this. And, you know, I'm proud of the product that we're putting out. And I think it's something that I would love for everybody to tune in and listen to. So Josephine's a rising star in this industry. And please give her a follow. As Sia just said, JChang1020. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter.
Well, I just gave her a follow. So again, that's Josephine Chang at JChang1020. That's super easy. Anywhere else where we can find you? Is that it?
Yeah, just Tee Off Sports. And I do a bunch of articles for Rotoballer. Obviously, I put out my model every single week that's customizable for everything. So everything I've talked about, you can make a copy of it. It's in my DraftKings article this week. I'll post a link to it on my Twitter at some point before that. But, you know, thank you guys for having me on. It's always a pleasure to do this show with you both.
And, you know, what better way? So speaking of Tee Off Sports, Joel, I think we just have one more thing to say other than good luck in the World Championships. But Tee Off Sports is a nice segue to sports.